Okay, cool. All
All
right.
right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Connor Hayes, and I'm the museum assistant here at the Kittitas County Historical Museum. And it's my pleasure to welcome you all here for tonight's presentation.
Welcome.
As we begin tonight's event, I would like to recognize that we are gathered together on the historic homelands of the Kittitas and Peshawanapan people, and recognize that today those bands are part of the Confederated Tribes and Bands of the Yakima Nation, a federally recognized Native nation constituted under the Treaty with the Yakimas of 1855. The indigenous stewards of this land practiced a subsistence lifestyle through fishing, hunting, and gathering since time immemorial, and remain committed stewards of this land, cherishing it, protecting it, and using it as instructed by their elders through generations, and actively practicing the traditions and culture as neighbors in the Ellensburg community. We are especially thankful for the Kittitas and Peshawanapan bands of indigenous peoples who've allowed us to learn from and share their stories and traditions with visitors from all across the world, as we serve as the cultural custodians of their basketry, beadwork, and other items. Then I would like to thank our membership for making tonight's presentation possible. Membership dues go to fund our lecture series as well as care and support of our collections and exhibits. So if you are a member, thank you so much for your support. And if you're not a member yet, please consider becoming one tonight. After tonight's program, we'll ask you to fill out a small survey so that we and our presenter can receive relevant feedback. It's important to have this information so we can continue to provide a great lecture series. Now on to our presenter. Our program tonight is presented by Julia Stringfellow, who has served as professor and university archivist at Central Washington University since 2015. She served as department chair of the library faculty from 2015 to 2020. Prior to coming to Central, Stringfellow was an archivist librarian at Boise State University. She holds a master's degree in library and information science and a master's degree in history from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. She became a certified archivist in 2011. Her favorite location in Ellensburg is the local history room at the Ellensburg Public Library.
Good place. Very good place, yes.
In addition to researching local history, she also enjoys serving as a tour guide for the Kittitas County Historical Museum's pub crawl tours. So please join me in welcoming Julia Stringfellow.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start by proposing something unorthodox since I had this wonderful presentation already. How many of you have smartphones? Show of hands. Okay. So I have the presentation on my tablet, and the first slide has a QR code to the slides. So I'm going to just quickly go around the room. Those of you with smartphones can scan the QR code, and that way you'll at least get to see the images as I'm talking about them. How does that sound? Okay, here we go. You're welcome.
Yeah, you have to.
Sure, I go through this. Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah, I see the back of your okay. Okay, and Mariah is going to she'll provide instruction on how to do that if anybody's having difficulty. Okay, so while she's doing that, let me just tell you a little bit about what I'm going to be talking about this evening, okay? So I took a sabbatical in 2023 from March until September and had an absolutely wonderful time conducting research at fabulous places such as here at the Kittitas County Historical Museum. And I'll be talking about the collections I researched when I was doing research here. How many of you have been in the local history room at the public library? Okay, well, guess what? If you haven't been there, you need to go and check it out. It's amazing. It is right behind the reference desk of the public library. It is a very happy place with these wonderful things called city directories and files on local residents, and it's just a great place to go and look at. So I encourage you to go there. I also did research at the Central Branch of the State Archives. I'm sure a lot of you know Bridget. She's absolutely wonderful. I'm very lucky to work with other archives and museums in the library in this town. And then the last place I'm going to gush about visiting and just loving. How many of you have been to the Family History Library in Salt Lake City? Isn't it amazing? Yeah. You go in there and people are so happy about doing genealogy, and they have these wonderful rooms for conducting oral history interviews, and you can sit down at your own computer hub and just research, family search to your heart's content. So it's a great place. And so at the start of my sabbatical, I had over 70 women I wanted to research. And I was convinced that I was going to be able to research all of them in 6 months. Right? Now we laugh. In the middle of my sabbatical, when I was starting to work on my book proposal, I was finally able to narrow down the list to about a dozen. I submitted the book proposal to Washington State University Press. The editor had some great suggestions, and I'm working on the book proposal still. I have a funny story to share about that at the end of this presentation. But in the presentation that you scan the QR code for, there is a link to the bibliography of sources I've used on the very last slide, so you can go and access that when you want to. So I'm going to be talking about 7 women this evening. I intentionally am only talking about women who are no longer with us. I didn't want any hurt feelings at this lecture, so I thought I'd play it safe. At the end of this lecture, when we have time for questions, if there are other women, well, obviously there are other women that I should be researching and knowing about. So that will be the time for you to share that with me. And I'm also going to ask that you hold your questions until the end, okay? So I'm going to be talking about 7 women, roughly chronological order by year of their birth, talking about how they contributed to the community. I'm going to keep looking at the screen thinking I'm looking at the just out of habit, but totally okay. All right, so first woman I'm going to be talking about, how many of you are able to access the PowerPoint on your phone? Oh, a few. Okay. All right. Okay. So the first woman I'm going to be talking about is Mary Ellen Stewart Shouty. And as I'm giving this lecture, I'm going to tell you all about the assumptions that I had going into this research. And Mary Ellen is the namesake of Ellensburg. She's known as the mother of Ellensburg. And I just assumed that there would be tons of information on her. And I was really hoping that she had written letters and that she had kept a diary. No. So to give you some information on Mary Ellen, she was born in 1846 in Kentucky. After her father passed away, when she was a teenager, she traveled with her brother across the plains to California at the age of 19. So this was in 1865. They were in a covered wagon with mules. It took them 6 months to go across the country and reach their destination. To add insult to injury, Mary Ellen had a horrible toothache. Oh. Right? Yeah. Yeah. So during the journey, it became so bad that she walked away from the wagon trail and took out the tooth with her own pocket knife. Oh, right. That's what I said. So they made it safely to California. Mary met John Alden Shouty, who was originally from Illinois and had come out to California, where some of his family were located. They married in 1867. Their first child, Dexter, was born the following year. They would go on to have 7 children. So they were an adventurous couple. They, here come my notes. Thank you. If you need this back, let me know. Okay. So after living in California for a couple of years, they moved to Seattle, where John's brother and sister lived. And John had a transfer business, and he decided that he wanted to move to the middle of Washington Territory. The land was good for cattle. It was reportedly good for farming. So John traveled to what is now Ellensburg and met a man named Jack Splawn. Oh. Yep. And Jack had a trading post known as Robber's Roost, and ended up selling it to John. So by this point, John and Mary Ellen had 2 children, and John moved his family from Seattle to the middle of Washington Territory by wagon. through the mountains. And he and Mary Ellen, the name of their dry goods store was Stewart and Shouty. Keep in mind her last name was Stewart. Yep. So their first child in Ellensburg was born in 1875. Her name was Lily Ellen Shouty Jenkins. Name sounds familiar, Jenkins? Yep, okay. So in 1875, John and Mary Ellen platted the land for what was going to be called Ellensburg. And on the land plat, which is included in the presentation in the slides, you will see that Mary Ellen's name is listed there right next to her husband's. That was an anomaly back in the 19th century for the wife's name to be listed as well as the husband's. So the town was called Ellensburg. They went on to build a house on North Water Street near the corner of North Water and Fifth Avenue. If you're hoping to go by and look at it later this evening or tomorrow, guess what? It's gone. Very sad. But there are markers on Main Street and Third Avenue. You know, if you're walking down the sidewalk towards that wonderful place called Heyday. Yeah, Heyday's wonderful. If you look on your right, there is a marker on the wall that says Shouty Trading Post, 1872. And below it is a concrete marker noting this is where Splon's store was that he established in 1870. So the next time you're walking towards Heyday, take a look for those markers. I was just looking at them Sunday. They should still be there. So the Shouty family collection is housed here at the museum, and it belonged to their next youngest son, Loyal, Dr. Loyal Shouty. And it was donated by one of his relatives to the museum about 15 years ago, I think. And I was hoping that there would be a treasure trove of letters between Mary Ellen and John. And no, there was one letter. And if you're looking at the PowerPoint on your phone, you'll be able to see it. It was a letter that she wrote in 1895. She talks about traveling to Kent, Washington to visit family and making it there safely. She signs the letter lovingly, your mother, Mrs. John A. Shouty. So it was really cool to like see this piece of paper that she had touched and written on, and really, really cool. In the PowerPoint, I included pictures of Robber's Roost, of the Stewart and Shouty dry goods store, and then a picture of their house on the far corner of the slide. So, we good? I'm still what? Oh, oh my gosh. Thank you. I'm adjusting the slides on my tablet while I talk, and I have to remember to also do it on the laptop. So I'll get this together. So John Alden Shouty passed away in 1901. After that, Mary Ellen went to go live with her daughter and son-in-law in Tacoma. She suffered a stroke in 1914 and then went to go live in Seattle with her other daughter. There is a wonderful collection at the University of Washington, Special Collections. It was a collection assembled by Edmund Meany, who was researching Washington pioneers. And in the collection, it lists the address for where Mary Ellen was living at in Seattle. And so I went to Google Maps, of course, because I wanted to see if the house was still there. Guess what? Nope. I like the way you all think. No, but it was just office buildings but anyways, one of the cool things that I did learn about Mary Ellen, I was able to do an interview with one of her descendants, Mike Stewart. And one of the things he remembered hearing about her was, why in the world would she marry that cowboy? She got all the way to California, and why would she marry this guy? And so, but anyways, from what he had heard from stories passed down by the family, it was, a happy marriage. They respected each other. Mary Ellen is buried at Brick Road Memorial Park here in Ellensburg. She's buried next to John. 5 of their 7 children are buried there as well. Her gravestone has changed over the years, and I'm not sure why. A previous gravestone said Mother of Ellensburg, and the current one doesn't say that. I reached out to Raven, who oversees the cemetery and is wonderful, and very prompt in answering questions, and she wasn't sure why that was the case either. Hmm? Oh. Looking at Mary Ellen, I mean, she came across the country as a teenager. She came across the state. She was raising her own family, and then she was also raising this young community where they were building connections and communicating with other pioneers in the area and building the town. So I'm big on anniversaries. You probably know that archivists and museum curators and directors are big on anniversaries. We like to celebrate. So like I said, in 1875, John and Mary Ellen platted the land for Ellensburg. What's happening next year? Okay, that's right. It's the 150th anniversary of them doing that. So there will be, wait. Yes, I think that's 150th. Yes. And so look for information on celebrating the anniversary of that and keep that in mind. Okay, so the next person I wanted to talk about is Mary Rowland McGraw Myers. Mary is Ellensburg's first female photographer that we know of. She was born in McMinnville, Oregon in 1862. Her parents divorced, which was very unheard of during that time. And her mother and stepfather moved the family to Washington Territory. Mary married when she was 18 years old and had a son, Francis, soon after that. And then there are conflicting reports over what happened. Some reports I've read have said that the husband abandoned the family. Some reports I've read say that Mary left her husband and son and moved to Seattle to become a seamstress and live with family friends, and eventually returned to Ellensburg. One of the mysteries I'd like to know what happened, because she and her first husband did divorce, and she went on to marry Austin Myers, who would become Ellensburg's first mayor. Austin was an attorney who had gone to University of Michigan to study law. He returned to Oregon where he lived. Then he wanted to come out to Washington Territory. He met Mary and they married in 1884. One of the great things about Austin was that he kept virtually every letter he ever received, right? Which is a dream for an archivist. And he also kept copies of letters that he sent. And so when I was on sabbatical, I went to Washington State University because that's where his papers are housed, and spent many hours reading these letters. He kept a journal. He talked about becoming married in 1884. He talked about his wife taking pictures. Really great way to learn about this person. And that's a book waiting to be written, I think, because everybody has time to do that, right? Mary and Austin had 3 children. They had Anna, John Rowland, and Eve. Eve was the daughter that eventually donated her father's papers to Washington State University in the 1960s. Mary's first son, Francis, I've read accounts that he came back to live with her in 1892. He then moved to Idaho when he grew up and lived there the rest of his life. There are no letters from him to Austin, his stepfather, in Austin's papers. For Austin's 70th birthday party, he was invited to the party. I don't know if he attended. So another mystery. I'd like to figure out what happened with Frank. So getting to Mary's photography. So Mary took pictures, glass plate negatives. Many of these are now housed at the Washington State Library. There is a wonderful online collection that you all should know about and you all should go access. How many of you have heard of Washington Rural Heritage? Oh my gosh, you all need to access this site. It's amazing. It's a collection of the history of the state. Many of Mary's photos that she took are included in this collection. She took pictures of her family sledding, doing outdoor activities. She took pictures of events in Ellensburg, and she took pictures of the Native American community, which no photographer had done yet here. She took pictures of how they were living, often in poverty. of their home life, of where they lived. So that is our documentation of what life was like back in the late 1890s and early 1900s, these amazing pictures that she took. Mary and Austin lived on the 400th block of North Ruby. From the pictures I've seen of the house, it was really beautiful. Guess what?
It's not there.
It's gone. Head to toe salon is there now, which is perfectly adequate for replacing a historic house. Okay, I'll be quiet. I have a problem with historic structures being torn down. So Austin was the first mayor of Ellensburg, as I said. He drew up the Constitution, the plan for the city in 1885. It was approved by the Washington Territorial Legislature because we didn't become a state until 1889. And then Austin went on to serve as mayor. He served as city attorney, as treasurer. He was very active in the community. On July 4th, 1889, what happened then? Guess where Austin was? He was in Olympia meeting with the Washington Washington Territorial Convention. I think I have that correct, because they were looking at Washington becoming a state. So several of the leaders of Ellensburg were over in Olympia when the Great Fire happened. Mary was at home with her 2 children and a maid, and was terrified that her house would become part of the fire. Fortunately, it was spared. News got to Olympia of the fire, and Austin got home as quickly as he could, but pretty scary. Mary passed away in 1940, and I'm fascinated with her. I'm fascinated with what happened with her first marriage. From the letters that I've seen between her and Austin, they obviously adored each other, and it was a happy union. And she was very active in the community, and she was documenting the community with her pictures. So go check out Washington Rural Heritage. It's just this amazing site, and we're lucky that we have it. Okay, the next person I'm going to be talking about is Mamie Evans Robertson. How many of you have ever heard of her? Okay, all right. So Mamie was the first female African-American minister at the African Methodist Episcopal Church here in town. I had no idea that Ellensburg had an AME church before I started researching her. So Mamie was born in Missouri. She traveled to Kittitas County with her family. She was married to James A. Taylor when she was 20, and they had 2 children, Edith and Edward. They divorced, and during this time, the AME Church in Ellensburg was being organized. It was on the 400th block of South Main Street. What's there now? It's the old AutoZone, which is now an empty building. So I've looked very extensively for a marker. I've asked Sadie, because the museum now owns that building, are you sure that there's nothing there? And, why don't we just dig up the building? And for some reason, she said no. But anyways, and it's also next to what was the Whipple filling station, which will come up in just a minute. But Mamie was appointed by the diocese, the 5th Episcopal Diocese of the country, to become the minister at the AME Church. She passed away in the 1950s, and what became of the church and of her house is another mystery. How many of you have used city directories for your research? Okay, so Polk City Directories, I have an example of one, are pretty incredible. One of my colleagues at Central calls them stalker books.
Oh.
So the city directories first began in the 1890s. They continued for about 100 years. In these directories, you could look up a person's name or a business. For a person, it would list their spouse, it would list their address, it would list their occupation, and if they owed taxes, it would also be included in the city directory. So this one is from 1990. I wanted to bring a more recent one because I was scared about bringing one that was much older and not in as good shape. But one of the women that I researched for this presentation I'll be talking about in a minute, Donna Nylander, is listed in the 1990 directory, and her address, I believe she lived on Sampson Street. So the city directories are available at the Ellensburg Public Library in the local history room. They're also available at the CW Archives where I'm at. We always like visitors, so if you want to look at city directories, feel free to come by and look at them. But I just find this a fascinating resource. Anyways, I was looking at these city directories because I was trying to figure out what had happened to Mamie's house and what had happened to the AME church. So Mamie passed away in 1956. The church continued on for a few years, and then as of 1963, there was no longer a record for it in the city directory. So I would like to know, when was it demolished? Why was it demolished? Why are there no pictures of it? And I cannot find a single picture of Mamie. I have found a picture of her husband and her children. I've looked on Family Search, Ancestry, asked anyone I can think of. I would really love to find a picture of her. Both of her children, Edith and Edward, ended up going to Central, and Edward took over as secretary and then leader of the AME church here in Ellensburg. Let's see. I got to remember to advance the slides on my laptop here. So the one good picture, well, not really a good picture. So I was lamenting to Sadie, I can't find a picture of this AME church. And you know Sadie, she has amazing research skills. And so she started looking on Washington Rural Heritage. She remembered that the Whipple gas station was next to the church. And so a couple of the pictures showing Floyd and Mike Whipple by their gas station show the AME church in the background. There you go. So those are the only pictures that we have of that church. Be sure to go. They're featured on the slideshow, and also, of course, they're on Washington Rural Heritage. So be sure to give them a look. Okay, let's see. And then on the slideshow, there's a couple of articles from the Daily Record that talk about the service at the AME church. They list Mamie as the minister. They talk about the AME church in Ellensburg and in Roslyn. So definitely worth checking out. Okay, so the next two people I'm going to be talking about, let's see how we're doing. We're doing okay. All right. So the next two ladies I'm going to be talking about taught at Central, but they were also very active in the Ellensburg community in training future teachers, in training elementary students. So Amanda Hebeler was a teacher. She was the director of the teacher training program at Central. How many of you have been to Hebeler Hall at Central? Okay, hands down. How many of you went to elementary school there? Okay, all right. So Amanda Hebeler, when that building was being designed, she was very instrumental in the design of it. The whole development of the child, mental, emotional, physical, was very important to her. And she wrote about this in the 1930s and 40s and 50s, before other people were really taking this seriously. She talked about the importance of having a library where children could be exposed to books and ideas and let their creativity grow. She talked about the importance of physical activity, of getting outside and interacting with nature. She talked about the importance of art and letting students engage in that. So she was, like I said, she was very instrumental in the design of the building. There used to be a fountain in front of Hebeler Hall. I wish it was still there, but it's not. And the building ended up being named in her honor. So Amanda was born in 1890. I need to come back to the mic, don't I? Here we go. Okay, so Amanda was born in 1890 in Michigan. She received her education at Michigan State Normal School, and then she studied at Columbia University in New York. She came to Ellensburg in 1924. And in the PowerPoint slides, there is a link to a lecture that she gave at Central in the 1960s, talking about her arrival in Ellensburg. So she took the train to Ellensburg. She walked to campus. She lived in an apartment in Hebeler Hall when she first got here. And she talks about walking down to the Valley Cafe and having lunch. So it's a really fun interview. She talks about all of a lot of the travels that she's done, some of the artifacts that she collected. Many of those artifacts are now housed at the Museum of Culture Environment at Central. Woohoo. I could have done that more loudly. But anyways, Amanda traveled domestically and internationally to Mexico, Italy, other parts of Europe. That was very unusual for a woman to do in the 30s and 40s and 50s. She trained many future teachers at Central Washington, as well as elementary school students. She also drove her 4T down Canyon Road to Yakima to train students there as well. I can't imagine her doing that during the winter, but she did. So I always find it very interesting to learn where people lived in Ellensburg. And when Amanda was in Ellensburg, she lived on 8th Avenue. And then she lived at 204 East 9th Avenue. And that house is still standing. And you probably have driven by it 1,000 times and not realized it was there. So look it up on Google Maps and drive by it. It's a really cool building. The architecture is amazing. She moved into the house in 1959 and continued to live there until her death in the 1960s. And then her partner, Sarah Spurgeon, continued to live there until she passed away in 1985. So a couple of books that I brought from the CW archives are books that Amanda wrote. And so one is talking about reading readiness and about using symbols and teaching children to read and getting them excited about reading, which is really great. Yeah. And then writing in the classroom, also about teaching children the importance of handwriting and sharing their ideas. And let's see, this book was written in the 1930s. This was written in the 1950s. When I checked them out a few months ago, they hadn't been checked out in years. It was it's really interesting to read her work and to read her ideas, which are still relevant today. So I thought that was really cool. Okay, so Amanda's life partner was Edna Mae Sarah Spurgeon. And Sarah was a professor of art and design at Central from 1939 until she retired in the 1970s. So Sarah went by Edna growing up and then changed her name, transitioned her name to Sarah. Edna grew up in Iowa and she went to University of Iowa for her education. She did 2 fellowships at Harvard University in 1929 and 1930. So just imagine traveling from Iowa to Harvard back then. Single woman by herself, likely taking the train from the Midwest to Harvard. I think that's pretty cool. And so after her education, Sarah taught at the University of Iowa for a few years and then went to Buena Vista College to teach in the English department. And Buena Vista was close to where her parents lived. When she got there, she was horrified to discover there was no art department. So she founded the art department there. She was its only faculty member while she was there. And then she also purchased the supplies for the program because there was no budget for it. I think that was pretty cool. Sarah came to Central in 1939. And in 1942, she took a 2.5 year leave of absence. What was happening during that time? The war, yes. So Sarah tried to enlist in the war and she was rejected. Boo to them. So instead she went to work at Boeing for that time, helping with the war effort. She returned to Central after that. Sarah retired from Central in the 1970s. And I have some cool images I was going to show on the PowerPoint. So there's one image of her showing a class how to put together frames at a Bellevue art fair in the 1950s. And then there's also a picture of her painting the mural at the Interpretive Center at the Ginkgo, for the Ginkgo Petrified Forest. Yeah, if you go there today, it's not there. I know, that's how I felt. That's exactly how I felt.
It's just there.
Sarah was well loved by her students. She was often referred to as the general. Hopefully that was an affectionate term. But in 1977, Central decided that they were going to be naming the art gallery in her honor, that is in Randall Hall, and still there today. So one of the things I was looking forward to in this presentation is showing you these amazing pictures from the dedication when people are in their 1970s wear and polyester suits. Anyways, you can see it hopefully on your phones, but some great images of Sarah. There's a picture of Dick Elliott standing next to a portrait he did of Sarah. Everybody here probably knows Jane Orleman. And so I was able to interview her a couple of times because she and Dick were very dear friends of Sarah. They were actually staying with her towards the end of her life, and they were there when she passed away. But Jane talks about how she and Dick would travel the state, collecting art from Sarah's former students because it was going to be shown at the opening of the gallery in 1977. So I thought that was really cool. One funny story that Jane told me was that when they first started staying with Sarah overnight, they took their dog Spot. And Sarah's like, that dog's not staying in my house. And Jane's like, well, either it stays or we go. So you decide. So I think Sarah made the right decision to let the dog stay. But Sarah's art can be seen. She was very active in the Ellensburg community, sharing her art. Her art is displayed all over campus. I believe it's displayed in a few places in town. The two pieces of art that we have on the easels that you can see were donated to the museum, and they were both done by Sarah. This was donated by Jane Orleman, and this was done when Sarah was in her early 20s. And then we're not sure who the portrait is of, but that's another picture done by Sarah. Okay. So that's something you actually can see. All right. So another assumption I made when I was doing this research was that I'd be able to easily find out who Ellensburg's first female mayor is. No. And so I checked with Bridget at the State Archives. And then finally I contacted the city clerk's office here in town. Beth and Cindy have been amazing to work with and so helpful. But they were able to look through old files of city council materials. And our first female mayor was Violet Buchanan. That name ring a bell with anybody?
Repeat what? Violet.
Violet Buchanan.
Oh, Buchanan.
Yeah. Okay. So Violet was born in Whatcom County, Washington in 1910. She lived until 2011, so she was 101 years old when she passed away. Yeah, wow is right. Yeah. So Violet's family moved to Ellensburg in about 1910, 1911. They lived in a house located at 908 North Water Street. That house is still standing. I went by and it's still there. It has green carpeting on the inside. I know this from looking at the real estate listing for it. Well, I'm always curious what the inside of houses look like. And so green carpeting, my goodness. So anyways, Violet's parents divorced. Her mom, Bertha, married a man named Charles Simpson, who passed away suddenly in the 1930s. Violet had two younger brothers, and after she reached adulthood, she decided to go to Seattle and receive her nurse's training. And she worked at Seattle Children's Hospital for a while. While she was working there, she was saving up her money because she wanted to go on vacation to the tropical island of Hawaii. She had always heard about it. She saved up her money. She went there in 1936 and she stayed there. Yeah, she stayed there for the next 15 years. Where was what happened in 1941 in Hawaii? Pearl Harbor. So that morning she woke up in her Honolulu apartment and she heard planes overhead shooting it at each other. Great way to wake up. And so for 6 months following the Pearl Harbor attack, residents were encouraged to wear gas masks and helmets. I have a picture here of her wearing one for protection. During her time in Hawaii, she worked at the local tuberculosis hospital. And there's an article that was done on her where she's talking about her time in Hawaii. And the reporter's like, well, there were so many young servicemen in Hawaii during the time. And, didn't you date anyone or get married? And she was like, you know what? I always pick the wrong guy. And I'm so glad that my friends married them. She went on to say that she knew that she would be returning to Ellensburg at some point because her mother was in poor health and she would need to return and take care of her. So she did just that in 1951. She returned to Ellensburg, and while she was caring for her mother, she became active in local politics. She joined the city council in 1955 and became mayor in 1957. She was only mayor for about 7 months. I'm not sure why. But the city council meeting minutes are housed at the state archives here in town. And it was really fun going back and looking at the minutes and seeing Violet's signature listing her as mayor. Her mom passed away in 1955. And so after Violet stepped down from being mayor, she decided to move to California and attend the University of California and receive her master's degree. She moved to Lodi, California, and she lived in the same apartment that she moved to in 1962 until her passing in 2011, right? So she was a nurse until her retirement. Then she became very active at the local library, which I think is a great idea. She was a historian for the Friends of the Library group there, and she was also active in the adult literacy program. When she passed away, there's this great obituary on her, but something that I wanted to point out. So I think Find a Grave is fascinating, findagrave.com, right? I love it too. And so she is interned with her mother at her mother's gravestone at Brick Road Cemetery here in Ellensburg, but her name is not on the gravestone, which I think is really sad. I mean, she was our first female mayor, and it'd be nice for her name to be there as well. But very interesting person that I hope to learn more about. So far, I've just found newspaper articles on her and hoping to find some primary sources. Okay, so the very last lady I wanted to talk about, and this is kind of, I feel like, a fitting way to finish this presentation, is Donna Jacobson Nylander. Donna passed away in 2019. I arrived in Ellensburg in 2015. I really wish I would have met her. But Donna was born in Wisconsin in 1930. She attended Carroll College and then University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. She was very active in volunteering at summer camps. And that was actually where she met her husband, James. They married in 1951 and then moved to Ellensburg in 1957, where he accepted a position in the athletics department at Central. Donna had 2 children, and she was very active as a volunteer in the community. I read a quote somewhere where it said, education was an ever-present priority in Donna's life. I really liked that. And Donna was also a water ballet instructor. And from what I've been told, her water ballet classes were very popular to take. So one of the highlights of researching her was that I interviewed Josephine Camarillo a year ago in May, because Josephine was a very close friend of Donna's. The Ellensburg Children's Musical Theater, playbills, scripts, images, that collection is housed at the public library. So I'm very glad it's safely housed there. Donna started the Ellensburg Children's Musical Theater in 1976. And from that time until 2015, she wrote over 20 plays, which is astounding. The plays were often based on events from her life, such as summer camping trips, The very last play that was done before she passed away was done in her honor, and the title of it was "It Takes a Village to Raise a Curtain." Yeah, but when I was talking to Josephine about Donna, Josephine shared that she had arrived in Ellensburg as a children's librarian in 2000 and wanted to become active in the community. And so she was told to contact Donna. So Donna took her to lunch one day and drove her around town so she could see where the important things were and encouraged her to get involved in the children's musical theater, which Josephine did. They did a production every other year in Ellensburg Little Theater. And then in 2013, Donna called everyone together, called the group together for tea and cookies and said, "I'm stepping down." She said, "You know what? This has been a fun run, but I am not getting any younger." And so she stepped down, and then the group did this production of "It Takes a Village to Raise a Curtain." And by that time, Donna was in a wheelchair and attended all the performances, and her family also attended, which I thought was really, really cool. The two books that Donna wrote, I wanted to share these with you. So one of the books she wrote, "The Teddy Bear's First Christmas." How many of you are familiar with this? Yeah, yeah. So there used to be a Christmas tea at Central, I've been told, and I really wish they would bring that back. But this book came out of a script that Donna had written about the teddy bear's first Christmas. And so she turned this into a book, which is really great. And then this one, Pebble Theater for the Young Performer. This came out of, she would often teach drama camp during the summer. And there's a story about throwing a pebble across the pond and what a difference it makes. So Pebble Theater, so pretty cool. So she was an advocate for children, for animals, for education. She started the children's musical theater to give children a way to express themselves and be creative. And then she only charged $3 for joining the theater per child, and that was just to cover the expense of printing the scripts. But if a child didn't have $3, she said, "That's okay. Just I'll cover it. Just join us." So I thought that was really cool. And the pictures that I'm showing of Donna are courtesy of Josephine that she donated for the presentation. So yeah, so I talked really fast, and this would have gone a little bit longer if you were looking at something on the screen that I could point to. But hopefully you all are able to access the presentation on your phones. And if you're not, just let me know and I can email you the slides for this so you can look at them and hopefully provide context to what I was talking about. There are people that I want to say thank you to. A few of them are attending virtually or in person. Connor, I made sure I went to the right slide. So on this first page of saying thanks, I included a picture that Mary Myers took of some people in their Ford T car visiting the latest city well outside of Ellensburg. It's really cool if you have a chance to look at it. And it's also on Washington Rural Heritage. So I want to say thank you to Josephine for letting me interview her and sharing so much about Donna and sharing the images. Karen Blair, I interviewed last year. She's a professor emeritus of history at Central, and she's done a lot of research on women's history, and her papers are at the CW Archives, which is really great. Karen's currently in Australia, so for some reason she couldn't make it tonight. Henry Johnston, who is the funeral director at Ellensburg Johnston and Williams Funeral Home. He's been really great in answering my questions about burial records, about memorial service records. And I learned that when Mary Ellen Shouty passed away in 1921, her body was brought back from Seattle on the train and the funeral was held the same day. I thought that was interesting. And then Cindy and Beth from the city clerk's office, who were so great in helping me learn who Ellensburg's first female mayor was. Mike McCloskey is doing something important called rehearsal for an upcoming performance at Morgan, but Mike's a local historian who's been really great. Fennell Miller, who I interviewed and who's been really great about sharing her knowledge of local history. Jane Orleman, of course, Ty Fellon, who is a local historian, also great about sharing his knowledge and information. One of the people I want to thank, this is the funny story I was referring to about Washington State University Press. So I had put off resubmitting my book proposal, thinking, oh, I've got plenty of time. Big mistake, right? So this past summer, Sadie messages me and she said, do you know that Washington State University Press is coming to an end? The university has decided to stop funding it, right? And so I'm panicking and I'm emailing the editor, and I contact my friend Roger Schaefer, who is a professor of law and justice at Central and who is an alum of WASU. He and his wife met there. And so I contacted him and I'm like, as an alum, will you email the editor and just share your concern and, you know, how this regional press needs to continue? And he's like, oh, they're not going to listen to me. I'm like, okay, fine. So 20 minutes later, he calls me and he's like, don't worry, the press is okay. I just talked to the editor. I'm like, what do you mean you talked to the editor? He's like, well, you know, I started calling around and I called the Alumni Association and they weren't any help. And I told them, I'm so glad I didn't join the association and pay you all money. And he's like, and finally I got the editor of the press and I told her how useless I thought the Alumni Association was. And she agreed with me. And so anyway, so the press had been saved at the last minute, fortunately, but I thought that was so funny. And the editor encouraged Roger to be an alum to be on their editorial board. So I was just like, I just told you to email her, not call her. And I really, I want to say thank you to Sadie and to Connor. They were so gracious with letting me come to the museum and do research and go down to the basement and, you know, look at the Mary Myers materials there and look at the Shouty family papers here. And Sadie was who I learned about Mary Myers from. I'd never heard of Ellensburg's first female photographer before. So I wish Sadie would come out. No? Okay, I may have to go get her. And then finally, I want to say thanks to the public library. Josephine and RJ and Piper and Regina have all been great about letting me come and do research in the local history room and down in the archives, which is amazing. Bridget Clift at the State Archives is just wonderful with her knowledge and sharing it and her patience and kindness. The Washington State University Archives is also great to work with. Of course, the museum here. And then my travel during my sabbatical was partially funded through a travel award I received from Central School of Graduate Studies and Research, which was really great. And then finally, I want to say thank you to my unit at Central, the Central Washington University Archives and Special Collections. How many of you know Marty Blackson? Isn't he great? I mean, I'm biased, but anyways, Marty is the other archivist in the department, and I've worked with him for 9 years. And then previous staff, Carolyn McCarthy, Carlos Pelli, our wonderful student workers that have included Emily Dalvitt. Emily's starting an internship here on Monday, which is really exciting. Becca Ramey and Lacey Colmore and Elizabeth Yanis. So lots of thanks, lots of gratitude and appreciation. I'm really sorry this didn't work, but hopefully this was still an interesting presentation and you learned something and you could access the slides on your phone. And so now I think we're going to try to take some questions. Okay.
Pointing to me?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Well,
Is it what? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you going to check the chat? Go ahead. I'm listening.
did you get information of history link?
Yes, I
What
did.
kind of specifically for Ellensburg, what would be on history?
It was mostly secondary sources. So I felt like looking at History Link was a good review of information. Looking at, the Washington State Digital Archives online, which is another great resource open to anyone, is a really great, resource for finding birth and marriage and death and burial records and land property records. So I would recommend that. History Link is like, it's a good introduction to learning about Ellensburg, I would say. So, yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
So what's the status of your book?
I am working on resubmitting the proposal and had a few big projects this fall that are now done. And so I'm looking at the book as a good winter project, good project for staying indoors and doing research. Okay, and I think somebody else had their hand.
Did you check the Methodist Church? I know they have history on the AME.
I did not.
Have a beautiful certificate praying.
Okay.
AME Church, I don't remember the date, but anyway, they have history on the original. I don't know how they got it, but obviously there's some affiliation with the Episcopal Methodist.
Okay, I will certainly check with them. That's a great idea. It's, I don't know if funny is the right word, but all of the repositories and individuals that I contacted with asking for information were all prompt and giving and sharing. And then I was trying to find information on the AME church here, and I contacted the AME headquarters in Nashville. Never received a response. Contacted the AME church in Seattle, same thing. So, but the Methodist church is a great idea. Yeah. Yes.
I was interested in your Amanda Hebeler
Yes.
application
Yes.
in the school year 1970-71. Taught third and fourth grades at Hebeler
Nice.
and did experimental teaching. I got my master's degree that year, teaching for creativity.
Nice. Awesome. That's good. Yeah. I've been told that Hebeler Hall has the same smell it had for the past 2 years. I just can't believe you said that. Yes, in the back.
Me?
Yes.
I just wanted to say, plug for the work that CVU Archive and Special Collections has done. So if anyone's interested in looking up history of Hebeler Hall or of the normal school or of the college elementary school, certainly the work that you did in the experimental school, so much of that has been scanned and digitized.
Yeah.
So if you go to the CVU Archives and Special Collections website and to their Scholar Works page, you can read like every old newspaper that Central has ever had.
Yeah.
Like going back to the very beginning. And it's the best. I highly recommend it.
Yes. If you want to go down a rabbit hole. So when I'm doing instruction sessions for students at the library, and I'll make a joke, like if you have nothing else to do on a Saturday night, look at the papers, and I usually get a few eye rolls, like, you know, we're gonna do that. But anyways, I keep saying it, hoping that one person will actually do it. Yes.
I just wanted to add, Donna Nylander was also a city council member.
Oh, yes, she was. I forgot to say that. She was city council member from 1984 to 1990, I believe, for 2 terms. Yes. Yeah. Yes. And Beth from the city clerk's office sent me this picture of city council from then, and I thought about sharing it, but I had other city council members in their 80s hairstyles and clothes, and I didn't want to embarrass anyone, so I decided not to share it. But yes, it does exist. So.
That picture there.
Yeah,
The picture right there?
right here? Yeah. Oh, that was done by Sarah Spurgeon.
What is it? Who is she?
I'm not really sure. All I know is that it's a portrait of an, and I didn't, oh, right here? I'm not sure. All I know is that it was done in the early 1920s. Sarah was born in 1903, and it was donated by Jane Orleman.
Oh.
Yeah, that's all I know. Sorry. Yeah. Yes. Whoever had their hand up.
Do you know if Donna Nylander taught at the YMCA here in Ellensburg? I'm
I think so. I think it,
trying to remember
Yeah.
that too, yeah.
and she also taught, some theater classes at Central and, I believe in the public schools in town too, I think. So, yeah, she was very big on education. Okay, yes,
Who was the second female mayor?
I don't know. I only wanted to ask, was it Molly? Okay.
Well, Molly was the mayor. I don't know if there's any.
Surely there was someone in between.
The fifties and the.
Sure. Yeah. Beth looked for a picture of city council when Violet was mayor, and there's no pictures, which I find really troubling, but I'll stop talking about that. Yes. I think women.
It's just a comment. I was Sarah Spurgeon's housekeeper for 5 years.
Oh, wow.
Cool. That was really interesting because she had a cook. She was in bed all the time at that point.
Right.
And it was in the late 1970s or early 1980s. But she had a cook and then she had a housekeeper. And so the hardest part about that job was cleaning a house that was always clean. Because she was always in bed and there was nothing there. But then the cook came at noon and cooked the lunch and then we all sat down together and had lunch together for about an hour. We would just converse.
That's really cool. We need to talk more. I want to hear more about this. Yes. Yeah. Amanda, at the public library, the local history room, the file on Amanda includes a binder where she hand wrote about her home on 9th Avenue. And it's really cool. She went room to room talking about the parts that she loved about it. And if you get a chance to go and look at it, it's really cool.
The house on 9th Street, Marilee Warren lives there now. She's an artist. And I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that the murals that Sarah did on the walls are still.
I hope so. Yeah. Because I was so excited to learn about this mural at the Ginkgo Petrified Forest and then learned, oh no, they took it down, which they should never do with art, but just, any other questions? Okay, thank you all so much. For your I'm going to email the slides to you. If you're unable to access them on your phone, just please let me know. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you. She was a man.
I didn't know that.
Second.
Oh, wow.